Hi all. A few months ago, I was traveling in Connecticut and had a chance to stop by J&L Orchids. For those of you that don't know, J&L is an orchid nursery that has really an amazing collection of plants, but they particularly specialize in miniature plants, and they have kind of a lot of oddballs, which is what I tend to like. While I was there, I had a chance to look around their nursery and all of the different plants they have. They have, again, miniatures to huge specimens. So it was really interesting. I also had a chance to pick up 2 plants while I was there. So if you ever have a chance to visit, if you're in Connecticut, I'd recommend it. They have a very interesting collection, and the people there are very nice and knowledgeable. So the first plant I got is the Aerangis luteoalba variation rhodosticta, which you can see here. He's continuing to grow well. He has new growth. His root tips look good, so I'm pretty happy with him. And then the second plant is Pleurothallis mammillata, which, if you can see, was in bloom recently. Although most of the spikes have kind of died back, there are still a couple of ones that have not fully developed. So I'm excited to see those guys go. I will put some video up when he was fully in bloom. And then here is the Pleurothallis while it was blooming. You can see it has these really long, slender spikes with blooms. I think I counted over 20 of them, so tons of blooms. And then here is a close-up, kind of the best I could, of the flowers. Really minuscule, elegant blooms on it. And just a picture I thought that was funny of my cat, and then a close-up of the flowers in that kind of classic Pleurothallis shape. And then just to talk about the plants a little bit more in detail, the first one, Aerangis luteoalba variation rhodosticta, is from Central Africa. They were first described in 1890. They are a miniature to small growing plant. Online, you're going to find somewhat varying advice on their culture. On the Internet Species Orchid Encyclopedia, it has them listed as growing from 1,200-ish to 2,000 meters. So that kind of indicates to me that they're possibly more of a intermediate plant. Although on J&L Orchids, they're listed as an intermediate to warm. So that kind of indicates to me that they're relatively tolerant of different temperatures. I would guess you just wouldn't want to go in the extremes either direction. Once a mature plant, they have very large blooms relative to the size of the plant. They have upwards of 12-inch spikes with many flowers on them. So for mine, which is still pretty small, he's in a clay pot with sphagnum moss. Because I have fans in the enclosure, this is approaching drying out pretty much every single day. So because of that, I am watering maybe every day to every other day, along with feeding. I do let him just about dry out before I water. I will note that, like most epiphytes, he comes from a quite humid place in the world. So in the enclosure, it's upwards of 80 to 90% humidity constantly. So I think providing higher humidity will definitely benefit them, along with most orchids. But if you're able to, provide it with adequate watering, allow it to dry out, and give it bright to indirect sunlight, I think they're a pretty tolerant plant. And then the second plant, the Pleurothallis mammillata, which was first described in 1970. It's a miniature Pleurothallis from Panama, and online it has them growing at 600 to 1,000 meters. So that should tell us something about its culture, namely that it is probably warmer growing than some of the higher altitude Pleurothallids. Of course, as you go higher in altitude, it's going to be cooler. So your plant will most likely prefer cooler conditions. I think that online there's not a ton of information about their culture. Andy's Orchids lists them as a cool to intermediate, which kind of contradicts the 600 to 1,000 meter growing range. So to me, again, that kind of indicates that it's probably a little bit more tolerant of different conditions as long as you're not going in the extremes in either direction. In my case, I've been providing it with bright indirect light through the LED bulb. You can also see that it is in a plastic pot with live moss on top. So this kind of prevents it from drying out too quickly. So because of that, I'm watering him probably maybe every other day, as well as feeding. So maybe 3 to 5 times a week. So this is now a couple of months later. I just want to really quickly give a couple more comments. You can see the Aerangis luteoalba has grown in very well. Tons of new growth. I think pretty much all of this up here is new. Another thing I want to mention about Aerangis is it's a twig epiphyte. So that means it grows on the twigs of trees or bushes, as opposed to something like the trunk of a tree. And generally, this means that they are going to dry out much quicker because you don't have tons of surface area for water to accumulate. So it's important that you don't let these guys remain constantly damp. They need that quick wet-dry cycle, which is something that the clay pot enables really well. And then for the Pleurothallis mammillata, you can see lots of new growths. I have also moved it into this clay pot, which is something I've been doing a little bit more frequently. Because I grow indoors, in the summertime, I have a little bit harder of time keeping temperatures down. So, of course, with the clay pot, you have that evaporative cooling effect. So it's been helping me keep some of my plants a little bit cooler. And it also is more airy. You're going to dry out a little bit faster than with a plastic pot. So that will be everything for this one. I just wanted to make a quick video about those two plants. And you may not have noticed, but my terrarium over there is completely empty. This is because I recently had a pest problem. So I've moved all of my plants into this temporary bin, and I'm kind of treating them for these pests. So I'll make a video about this in the future, but it was a pretty informative experience. And I think some of the mistakes I made would be useful for others to know about. So I'll make a video on that, but that's everything for now. Thanks all.